When I first got in, I was very data driven, and I just thought that products were the most important thing for success. You got the right product, everything else takes care of itself. Over the course of the last 15 years, I've realized it's not that P word, it's actually people. So when I look at, hey, what is my current motivation? I'm looking at, yes, I'm going to pursue building a product that I believe is not currently addressed in the market. That's my vessel. Well, what's my motivation to create something? Well, I think it's about community, and I think it's about, relationships.
Welcome to Mastering the Numbers. I'm your host, Joe Mallo. My guest today is Scott Hubble. He's the founder and CEO of Awaken RV. Scott, thanks for spending a little time with me today.
Hey, thank you, Joe. My pleasure.
Yeah. Well, it's been a few weeks since we initially talked, and I know things are moving along for Awaken RV. Give the audience tell us a little bit more about Awaken RV.
Sure. I've been in the RV industry for about 17 years, and I started with teardrops, moved into truck campers and teardrops. And so I got a feel for community-driven niches within the RV industry. About a year ago, I woke up one day and I just realized, I'm not as passionate as I was. I'm not really having a lot of fun. And that might sound a little shallow on the surface there, but I really feel like you need to be like all in with what you're doing. And I had read a book called From Strength to Strength, and just, hey, reassess your life where you are. You're sort of at this midway point. So I did some reflection and just talked it through with my employer. And, after a couple months, stepped out on my own and said, you know what, I'm going to stay in the industry. I'm going to do something new and unique and from what I used to do. And then I'm going to capitalize on a lot of opportunities that are unredeemed. So, I'm just jumping out there looking for things that I can take advantage of and build a team that I can be proud of and impact people, frankly, in an exceptional way.
So you've been in the RV industry for a long time. How has it evolved over the 10, 15 plus years that you've been doing this?
Yeah, it's you've got your staples. If you break it down, you've got your motorized and you got your towables. And then I've never played on the motorized side. I've seen it grow. I've seen Class Bs in particular really explode over the course of the last, 5 to 7 years. Over on the towable side, when I first got involved, I was approached to do a project for a company that was distributing teardrop trailers. I had no idea what that was. I knew what a travel trailer was, but I didn't know what a teardrop was. And I found out that that company probably distributed about 300 a year. And as I grew to understand that niche, there was only about 500 a year being consumed. Well, from the time I got introduced to the product to the time I exited, that space really grew to more around 5,000. So about 10 times what it was, 15 years ago. And, yeah, you had some European influences. Yeah, people were looking to get lighter, be it have a smaller footprint, do things more sustainable, environmental friendly, just be different. So I really saw that segment explode first with teardrops and then all different other types of shapes, micro towables. So from where I sit, that's where I saw a lot of the changes. As I looked over some of the other types of towables, what I saw is obviously some of those, I guess, design changes. We tend to track after Europe, you know, maybe a good 3 to 5 years. And that's not just in the RV industry. That's sort of a rule of thumb in a lot of areas. But so that's sort of the growth I've seen. I mean, I see us consuming a lot more, than I did at first in, say, 2010. Whereas like the last 7 year average, even in like you could throw out COVID, and then throw out some of these latest rebound years and just sort of look at that period of time. And there was really good sustainable growth compared to when I
Yeah.
first entered.
So for the audience that may not know, what's the difference between the A class, B class, C class teardrop? Can you just explain that a little more? I know I had to look it up about 7 or 8 months ago when I was
Mhm.
because I didn't know what they meant, but there might be others that don't know either.
Sure. So your class A's, B's, and C's are all vehicles with motors. So they're all motorized. An A is sort of like a bus size. A B is more of a van, and a C is one of those, bigger, wider, chunkier vans, for lack of a better, explanation.
Yeah,
When you look over then in towables, you have fifth wheels, which sort of have, that um, attic mezzanine thing sitting over
yeah,
your truck bed. And then you've got the classic longer towables, let's say an Airstream. Then you start getting the smaller stuff like teardrops. And then there's yet, let's say a folding camper, something that can definitely collapse and just get pulled right into your garage. And then there's the truck camper, which just sits in the back of your pickup truck. So you don't need to worry about, where can I park this 30 to 55 foot long thing I've put together? You can just pull into a normal parking spot.
yeah,
So yeah, there's a whole array of options out there within the industry.
yeah. There are a lot out there for sure. Thanks for clarifying that for not just for the group, but also for me. So starting the business, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome? Um, and I guess just give us a little bit of that.
Absolutely. I guess for me, if you know me, I like to go fast. When you go fast, you fall down a lot. But I'm also 48 years old now. So the last several years, I've really learned to temper my expectations and rely a little bit more on my wisdom than my smarts. But nevertheless, I'm starting something fresh. I'm moving, I guess let's say, out of a perch or a field general position to back on the front lines with a really small, tight group, which means, hey, you're going to be asked to do a lot of different things. You're going to wear 27 different hats again. When I first made this move, I saw an opportunity to do it quickly and make the launch quickly. And I pursued that for a couple of weeks and really believed I could pull it off. But when I had a deeper discussion with my fiberglass partner and really detailed out what I wanted to do, he said, Scott, I want to do it just as much as you do. I want to get there just as fast as you do. He said, but we need to do this slow because everything that you want to give to the client is going to take a little more time and effort on my side, being intentional with the design. So I guess lesson number one was just being patient with it. Some of those other hurdles, I guess, is then saying, okay, what pieces do I need to put in place in terms of team? Because I certainly don't know everything, and I certainly can't do it alone. So how do I, take these steps in this journey? Because I'm still sort of pre-business in a sense. We're really close to launching, um, but this product needed to be pulled out of my head
Yeah.
and it needed to materialize in an accurate depiction of that. Um, so, I reached out to a few different engineers and worked with, one from the RV industry. He was in the space a couple decades ago, went over to Europe, got in the supply game. Another one from Google, and then another one who was currently in the industry, had worked at Winnebago, and just brought the team together with my fiberglass partner and slowly, piece by piece, imagined this thing, spoke to a lot of current consumers, both in and out of the molded fiberglass market, and came up with what we feel is just a total game changer. Very, very different than anything else that you can see there now.
Yeah. Um, is there anything? I know you're still in pre-launch. but close. Is there anything you would have done differently from the start of this company build? Kind of that hindsight 2020.
Hmm. I've learned a lot. Okay.
Okay.
So I guess I was ahead of myself. I might have vetted some things a little bit differently. I think I recall 10 weeks after I started. When I left my former employer, I didn't really do a whole lot for about a month. And then I sort of started putting the pieces together and, figuring out what I wanted to do. But after about 10 weeks of that, I looked back and I said, I could have done everything in the last 5 days. And that to me was really frustrating, but it was also part of education. So I don't know that I could have gone faster than I did.
Yeah.
Um, but I think maybe I'm I'm adverse to, I guess, being an initiator sometimes. I love to initiate the product, but to initiate conversations, if I was a little more proactive on that conversation initiation, I probably could have curbed some of that 10 weeks to 7 or 8. And then I could have
Yeah.
curbed the last 6 months to perhaps, 4. I'm not sure
Right.
exactly. We'll see. I guess we won't see. But some of that urgency, I've always been an urgent individual, but it's always been consumer focused, not business building. So, because I believe you need to be a little more methodical, because when you're building a business, you're going to set, it may not be the cornerstone, but you're going to set some of those foundational pieces. And if you're off kilter, then, you're stuck. You're going to have to bulldoze a whole lot to fix a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a balance there.
Yeah. Certainly. Well, you mentioned that as you started this company, you're all of a sudden you're once again taking over 20, 24 different things that you're running around doing on a day-to-day basis. I get that. I feel that sometimes on a week-to-week basis myself. How do you work to find some type of work-life integration? Not necessarily 50-50, but just find some time to breathe.
Mhm. Well, you know, um, it's a really good question because when you're starting something up, it's always on your mind. It's always churning in the background. And the balance is, how can I be present for my family? Or how can I take a breath somewhere for myself and my own sanity?
Right.
Um, and honestly, the answer is pretty simple, but it's hard to do, right? And it's just really about establishing a schedule and a rhythm and a list of priorities and saying, this is what's going to happen. So frankly, my days right now, they're very structured. I'm leaving the house at the exact same time. I'm getting home at the exact same time, a few minutes here and there because of traffic. I'm doing the same things on the bookends so that I know what I have in the morning with my family. I know what I'm going to have in the late afternoon, evening with my family. And I know everything in between is about building. And, if I'm sitting on the couch, um, and my wife's reading a book or we're watching a show and something pops in my head, I'll write it down. But I've worked really hard actually for the last couple years. Just when I walk out the door, I'm out the door.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing to swallow, I think, if you call yourself an entrepreneur. I was actually just thinking about this in the car 2 days ago. And I'm like, you know what? How do I turn it off, but not turn it off? Because if I turn it off, then I got to get on the bike and start getting the momentum going again. But if I don't turn it off, then I'm not present. I'm not being the husband and the father I need to be. So, yeah, it's a great question, Joe. I don't have a magic answer, but yeah, hard schedules. That's the thing.
Yeah. There isn't really a magic answer to it, but sometimes it's not shutting it off. It's just pausing it for a moment so we can spend time with, like you said, with your family. So it's just being structured in the way that you are. I think that's great. So what's the biggest motivator that's sitting out there for you to make this company, um, successful?
Mhm. I think over the years, my motives have changed. My whys, like, when I first got in, I was very data driven, and I just thought that products were the most important thing for success. You got the right product, everything else takes care of itself. Over the course of the last 15 years, I've realized it's not that P word, it's actually people. So when I look at, hey, what is my current motivation? I'm looking at, yes, I'm going to pursue building a product that I believe is not currently addressed in the market. That's my vessel. Well, what's my motivation to create something? Well, I think it's about community and I think it's about, relationships. So when I look at that at the business level, the people that I'm doing business with, you know, I want us to all have an authentic relationship where we're lifting each other up, elevating each other's lives in one way or the other. I want this place to be a place of rest and restoration. And you might have had a rough time and you come in the morning and you're leaving fully energized at the end of the day. It's an opportunity to just really help people in the local community. And then as you look out and in the build where you're bringing in suppliers, you're bringing in dealers, you're bringing in end consumers, you have the opportunity to change a consumer's life with the right thing. You have an opportunity to impress upon dealers that, a two-sided relationship, this is not just simply a business transaction, this is a partnership. And you can really see how people's lives change in a sense. I was on the phone with a dealer and he said some words to me that I almost didn't know what he was talking about. They were just extremely humbling. He said, you've changed my life. I consider you a mentor, and blew my mind. But I think when you have the opportunity to sit in a position where you can wield some influence in people's lives and improve it, whether it's through an RV or through a widget or whatever it happens to be, you need to redeem that opportunity because after all, I believe life's about people. One thing I say is that people matter most. That's one of my mantras. And at the end, yes, I love to create. Yes, I love to be known as, somebody got a good idea and they won with it. Sure, I think we all want that. But at the end, it's about making a deeper impression with people.
And I always look at RVs as a way for a family to get away, right? Get away from all the chaos, take a breath. There's usually you're sitting around playing Xbox. The kids aren't anyways, and they're not watching TV. They're out wandering around and enjoying wherever they're at. So I've always looked at them that way, which is probably why we're trying to we're trying to get one. So
Oh, great. It's a fun
yeah,
space to be in.
it is. It really is. So let me ask you this: what's the most challenging part of I guess the manufacturing side of the RV industry?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of a balance, right? You've got to comply with all the regulations. I mean, if you join the industry. So in the design process, you need to be constantly thinking about, hey, does this fit within regulation? Yeah, there's supply chain, just like with any other industry. There's setting up efficiencies within the, assembly line and whatnot. Um, I don't know if there's really just one. I believe it's really the balance of, see, I don't want to just make something. I want to make something unique. Um, and I think sometimes when you set out to make something unique, there are barriers. And you need to figure out how can I push this barrier or manipulate this barrier in order to accomplish what my end goal is. Because I'm not going to bend on what I'm designed to build. I'm going to have to bend the guardrails. Um, so trying to be creative, trying to find those solutions where you can bend the guardrail in order to accomplish what you want, because those things just don't happen. You have to make them happen. So there's a whole bunch of normal processes that occur, right? But every industry has some kind of guardrails or rules, regulations, laws. Um, so this one is really about doing something different. How can I do that by just pushing those away and making that room?
It sounds like that's a difficult process.
It can be. We ran into something relatively recently. where it looked like something within the design had changed somewhere along the line, and we didn't catch it at the last review. And we looked at it and we're like, wow, how in the world did this happen? And we went back and said, okay, and this is something I actually love. Over the years at my former employer, there was a screw up. No, there's not a screw up. There's not a problem. There's an opportunity. It's a possibility. And that's what we did. We took what had been made and said, we can work off of this. If we take it this way, we can create a new opportunity to, create more storage or whatnot, as an example. So there's always a different angle that you can pursue if you are willing to just remove the cage from your thinking.
Where do you see Awaken RV in the next 12, 36 months?
Um, that's a great question. I love the 12 to 36 because that's all I've thought about. I've not thought about month 37 really. Um, at the end of this year, I think we'll have built, a small number of trailers, about 125 or so. We'll probably have a team somewhere in the neighborhood of, 10. Um, but in the 6 months after that, which would be up to 12, we will have introduced two more units on top of this first unit. So then we'd have three units. And this endeavor is actually comprised of six total units. One new one to be introduced approximately every 4 to 5 months. So therefore, I would see we'd have that whole host of units introduced. We'd be right on the cusp of being where we wanted to be in terms of fully fleshing out all the floor plans, all the production, what we would know what the yield is, generally speaking, and demand on the Awaken initiative, before we start to pivot to something new. And there are quite a number of possibilities for something new. We're being inundated already with requests for something new, and we haven't even built anything. So
Yeah.
I got to keep my head down. I got to keep my horse blinders on, and we're going to pull this thing over the line. We're going to flesh it out with the next few. I would tell you that, this year, like I said, 125. Next year, about 550. The year after that, we'd probably be pushing around 900. And that's 2.5 years in the books. And at that point, the facility we're in right now might be getting a little too small. So that's where the fun begins because we're backed up right against the farm. There's some opportunity to really expand if we wanted to stay in this facility, which of course would be a preference. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're talking about dreams at that point. New buildings, new projects. Um, yeah, 36 months. That's about the magic number for us to be looking at right now.
Awesome. So, as an organization, how do you differentiate yourself from others out there that may be doing something somewhat similar?
Mhm. So I guess on two levels, right? If you look organizationally, I'm not necessarily going to compare myself and how I approach business, or at least approach my team and my culture. I'm not going to compare myself to anybody. I'm going to say, who are we? What are we about? This is what our stamp is. You like it? Get on board. You don't like it? There's plenty of other jobs out there. But when I talk about the business itself, there's two subsegments there. I would say in terms of the product, I use a filter that I created. It's just like a Venn diagram,
Yeah.
the 3F filter. And I look at things, okay, what's happening out there in terms of form? What's happening out there or what's not happening out there in terms of function? And then, of course, the third one is the financial element. And I'm looking to identify those gaps and the overlaps. And where can I grab the opportunity where they all three meet in the center, or at least two out of three? Um, so as I approach that, I am looking for those gaps in the market. I am going to be doing something radically different. Yes, is it within a certain niche? Absolutely. Will it compete outside of that niche? I really believe it will. The other thing in that though, so we talked about maybe from some culture aspects, we talked about the product, but we talked about maybe some of the business philosophy. And I don't mean a mission or a purpose. I mean, like, how am I going about it? So we've got the operation broken up where we are doing production of the fiberglass pieces off-site, and then we're bringing in the shell here. And then from the time it comes in here to the time that it could be ready is literally a matter of 2 days. Whereas if you look in the industry as a whole, it might be a 7 to 10 business day turnaround from the time you get your materials in to the time it's out the door. So that's really a competitive advantage in terms of scaling. If we want to be able to go rapidly here on this side, we can. And then obviously on the fiberglass manufacturing side, we can always stockpile if we'd like to do that. So we have that opportunity to sort of, I guess, manipulate the ramp up time and differentiate ourselves in that way.
Right. So what's some of the best business advice anybody's given you along the way, whether it's been in starting up this business or just your previous experience, wherever it happened?
Hmm. It's a good question. I've learned a lot, but this is really the main industry I've been in. When I graduated, I had a bunch of degrees, worked for the state auditor's office, worked for a marketing firm, and then after a couple of years in total, I entered this industry. And frankly, if you look at the industry, I've been in this part of the industry and the industry as a whole. Um, So I tell you that the lessons that I've learned really probably didn't come from people in my life outside of, I'd say, more personal advice than business advice. Some of the advice that I've really received, I'm gleaning from reading, from podcasts, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Some of that personal advice, which absolutely pours into business. The owner of the former company I worked for. He was a former minister in the Amish community. He left the Amish. He still pastors in a way, and he just really helped me view life differently. I was very metrically driven. Like I said, very product driven. I was a young punk armed with degrees, just wanting to, market and sell and, get more efficient. And, he taught me, hey, the way that you actually do succeed in life is to build people, not to build product. So I thought that was fantastic. And you can absolutely put that into a business sense, right? Um, there's just a couple of easy things. That's a people matters most thing. Another thing I love is don't talk about it, be about it. And again, that works in business, that works in your life. Um, but it's not what you say. You can run your mouth. People are watching. They're always watching. So you may not think you're a leader, but you're always leading because someone has their eyeballs on you. You may not think that you're a role model, but you are because someone's always watching. So those are my things. I mean, walk the walk, talk the talk, because people do matter most.
Yeah, I like that saying, people are always watching. I think it's why it's so important to be professional at all times with everybody, with your co-owners, employees, everything. So, because someone they're always watching. Um, maybe a fun question here that popped into my head here a second ago. What's something that people can't Google about you or your organization if
Hmm.
they're doing research on you?
Yeah, that is a fun question. Up until a day or two ago, you couldn't see the trailer. So if you happen to stumble over the website right now, you could see that. You absolutely would have no idea what the amenities look like inside or all the features and benefits. Personally, I don't have a bio out there, but I'll tell you, I've been through the gauntlet. That's really made me a really well-balanced person. I've been bankrupt physically. I've been on life support. Financially, I didn't have two nickels to rub together, and I owed 100 nickels. um, spiritually, emotionally, you name it. I've been as low as you can go. And I've been told you should write a book. And I wish I did. Because now I've forgotten everything.
Yeah.
And that's what part of what makes me successful in a sense. Um, Somebody said, "Hey, how are you so resilient through all the things you deal with?" And I said, "The truth is simply I get through the day and I delete it. I forget about it and I start the next one." And there's pros and cons of that. Um,
For
but
sure.
that's really it. I mean, look, this company is it's about doing something new. It's about asking people to, wake up from, we all sleepwalk through our lives, right? We all think, oh, well, I can go path A or path B. I guess we'll see what happens. Hey, let's wake up. Life's more about more. Let's wake up our imagination. Let's find new destinations. Let's find new opportunities. Let's do something different. So I guess
Yeah.
that's sort of it in a nutshell for me.
Great. Listen, I really appreciate you taking some time to spend it with me and our audience. I definitely learned some, and I'm excited to see where this is heading for you. I will be certainly paying attention. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
Yeah, absolutely. We can be reached by phone 330-778-0004. You can find us on the web at www.awakenrv.com. We are also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. And yeah, shoot us an email off the website. We'd love to connect.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you very much for taking part in my interview series. Everybody out there listening, I want to thank you as well. And I just want to do a quick shout out to my marketing team at Check Off Your List, Alyssa and Lisa, for making this podcast happen. Um, Everybody, have a great day, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Mastering the Numbers. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you so much, Joe.
All
Appreciate
right,
it.
take care. You've just tuned into another episode of Mastering the Numbers. We hope you found valuable insight to boost your financial success. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Keep pushing forward, and thanks for listening.